I've just put a bit of masking tape on the front so that I can remember which side of the lid goes with which side of the box. Now I need to decide where to cut the hinge, and I think what I'll do is measure the distance between the hole and the end on this side, which is 30mm. So I'll make a cut 30mm away from this hole, and that way all of the screw holes will be symmetrical.
I used a junior hacksaw to cut the hinge to length.
Next I want to cut a recess into the box which will accommodate the hinge. So I need to measure the thickness of the hinge, and that's 3.3mm. So I'm just going to centre the hinge by eye, and now I'll mark up the material that needs to be removed. I've put an ordinary straight bit into my router, and I need to set the distance between the tip of the bit and the router base to 3.3mm. And that looks about right. And the distance between the outside of the router bit and the outside of the base is 38mm. So I'm going to set up a straight edge 38mm away from this outside line. And now I'm just going to check that this is equal on both sides.
I made the cut with the router and then squared up the edges with a chisel.
And that's a nice fit. Now I just need to drill some pilot holes and add the brass screws. I've cut some little plastic shims, and these are going to be used to make sure that the top of the hinge is flush with the top of the box. And then I'm going to add some glue to the top of the hinge, and then I can attach the lid, open the lid and add the screws. I normally use super glue for this, but I don't have any at the moment, so I'm just going to use some 5-minute epoxy. I just need to make sure that this is flush with my fingers. And I'll add a bit of weight just to make sure that that's really pressed down onto the glue. This should now be dry. Time for the final sanding now, and I'm going to take this to a higher grit than I would normally, mainly because I want this brass to be nice and polished.
I sanded at 120, 240, 400, 600 and finished at 1200 grit. And then I applied some teak oil.
I've just given the box a second coat of the teak oil, and I think I'm going to stop there as it's looking really nice. I've bought some of these brass upholstery pins on Amazon, and I'm going to use these as feet for the bottom of the box.
I measured in 30mm from each corner and used a mallet to insert the pins.
Originally when I had the idea to make this box, I thought about writing out some lettering on the lid with my brother's and his fiance's name, and also with the date of the wedding. But since I've inlaid the brass, I kind of like how it looks without that. So as an alternative, I got this solid brass plate engraved, and I bought this online from the engravingshop.co.uk, and the cost was around £15, which I think is pretty good. And they even provided screws, which was a nice surprise. And because I'm already happy with the way that the lid looks, I'm going to mount this brass plate on the inside of the lid.
I centered the plate, drilled pilot holes, and then added the screws.
Next I'm going to apply some of this clear brie wax, and the main reason that I'm applying wax is so that once it sets I can buff it out to a nice sheen. I left the wax overnight and now I can buff out the finish with a clean cotton cloth. Latches. So originally I bought this double ball catch latch, and that was going to be mounted to the inside of the box to keep it shut. But then I got to thinking that it would be good to have another brass accent visible on the front of the box, so I bought this one on eBay. But this thing is only 1 inch wide and it looks really silly on the front of the box, so that's no good. So I looked on eBay again, and this time I bought this one. I wish I could explain how cheap this feels in the hand. It's made of the thinnest material possible, and it's held together using rivets, so I don't really trust that this is going to stand the test of time. That's basically junk. So I looked on the internet yet again, and I found this one on Etsy, which I've just ordered. This is by Models and Craft Shop. It's a handmade one, and after shipping the price is around £6. So hopefully, 4th time lucky. There's a lot of antique brass coloured ones, but that's not really the look that I'm going for.
So just to give you an update, now about a month has passed and Alan and Selena's wedding has happened. I had to give the box to them incomplete because the latch that I ordered from Etsy never arrived. And finding a brass latch that is the right colour and decent enough quality has been an absolute nightmare. There's obviously a real gap in the market, so if there's anyone who works with brass out there, make some latches. But I did eventually manage to find another one on Etsy. It's decent quality, it's solid brass. Unfortunately, it's the wrong colour still, and also it's slightly too large for the box. It was the height of the latch that was the problem, so I made some adjustments to it on the disc sander. I probably took about 4 or 5 millimeters off both the top and the bottom of the latch, and that brought it down to the right size. The next job was to tackle the colour. I needed the brass to be shinier and less dull, so what I did was to sand it by hand with some 600 grit wet and dry paper, and then I buffed it using a method that I haven't used before. I sanded the latch with some 600 grit wet and dry paper, and that's made it nice and shiny, but it's also brought out some of the imperfections in the latch. You can see here there's a few lines from where it was machined. So what I'm going to try and do is buff out the finish and remove some of those imperfections, and what I would ideally use for that would be a liquid cutting compound, but I don't have any of that. I do have some solid green polishing compound though, so I'm going to charge up one of these buffing pads that I have in my drill with that, and now I'm going to use that to buff out the latch. This is after the polishing. It's come out nice and shiny. So as you can see, the box is now in use, and I can finally add this latch to the front. So that's the mahogany box with hand-cut dovetails and brass inlay box. That's a bit of a mouthful. Complete, and Alan and Selena seem really pleased with it. The hand-cut dovetails turned out better than I thought they would, but they took much more time than I thought they would too. I was really pleased with how the brass inlay turned out. That shiny gold colour against the dark wood I just think looks fantastic. The biggest problem in this project was finding a decent quality shiny brass latch. This project took somewhere between 18 and 20 hours to complete, and it was made entirely from one solid mahogany wardrobe panel, which means that I've got another solid mahogany wardrobe panel still to use in the future. And I really look forward to working with mahogany again soon because it's just really nice wood to work with. Thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.